Hey everybody, today we are going to learn about making web navigation bars and other web button techniques. We're going to go over just the very basics today, and there are a lot of tutorials online to kind of help you guide your way here. So I'm going to just give you kind of a brief overview. Alright, we're going to go ahead and start, and I'm going to make my document something relatively large here. Let's do maybe like 10 by 4, which isn't as large as I made it sound like. All right, I'm going to start by creating a background. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my stroke, maybe get a nice darker, maybe blue color here. And we've created backgrounds before, but this one we're going to just have just a nice dark kind of way to kind of get us going with our tool creation. All right, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw that out. And after I draw it, I realize I need to make it maybe a little darker. So I'm going to go and saturate it a little bit and darken it out. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to make that a radial gradient. So kind of undid the work I just did, but I can go in here and set my colors, and it will kind of bring it back to where it was at, which is kind of nice. I like to keep my gradient colors relatively close together, and the reason I do this is, it really gives me a chance to kind of get something really nice going on and something very close to one another. There we go. You can see it's starting to come together there. Rather than just black and white or something very generic. And this is just going to give me a nice background for my colors to kind of play off of and whatnot. So after I do that, and I'm just kind of messing with it, I could get my gradient tool in here and click and select it here. There it is. And kind of move that around where I want it to. Maybe I want it to be a little lighter on the bottom and a little darker on the top. It's really up to you guys what you want to do here. Alrighty, that looks good to me. Move that over back. And go to my layer, and I'm going to rename this BG for background. I'm going to go ahead and lock that layer and create a new one for my nav bar. And so I'm going to call this nav body. So we're going to do some work on it. Alright, now there's tons of tutorials online about Photoshop, and in Photoshop they'll show you how to create these nav bars. The thing you can do, which I actually do often, is I take the Photoshop tutorial and I actually try to translate it in vector. And think of it as like a foreign language. You try to translate one language into another. It's actually really not that hard. It's just the ability to kind of create something in solely vector without any raster effects such as Photoshop effects. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to kind of create a makeshift nav bar. Alright, so I'm going to start with a rounded rectangle, and I don't have to make my rectangle rounded. I just think this happens to look pretty good. We're going to do a gradient again, but I'm going to just start by drawing it out so you guys can see it. And that looks roughly about where I want it. And I'm going to go to my gradient tool and I'm going to set this to linear. Now, right now, my linear gradient is going left to right. I want it to go up and down. I can use my gradient tool, or I can simply change the degrees of my gradient. And you know what? I'm going to do -90 here. I like the lighter portion to be at top. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of draw this out a little bit. Maybe lighten some areas. And this little diamond in the middle here, you can see it changes the flow of the gradient itself. Now, if you get really ambitious, you can go ahead and add a third color and really start to see some cool results. So let's add 3 here, and we're going to get a nice rounded result. There we go. Not too bad. All right. So let's take a look at what we have. You can now see we have a nice nav bar, or a start of a nav bar. And there's a few more things we can do to this. So, for instance, now we have to figure out what our nav bar's function is going to be. We're going to add highlights and all of that, but first I need to separate it into a couple of different categories. So I want to have like a home button in here, and maybe a about me, and a contact, and a gallery button. So I need dividers. Now, dividers they sound really hard, but they're actually really, really easy. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to lock this, and I'm going to do a new layer and call it div. And I'm going to start with those. So to do this, it's pretty easy. You can use a rectangle, or you can use a line tool, a stroke. So what I'm going to do is, I'm using smart guides here. I'm just going to connect this to my path, and I'm going to zoom in real quick so you guys can kind of see what we're doing. And now that I have that path selected, I'm going to go ahead and add a stroke to it. Now, it depends on your resolution how big the stroke's going to be. And I'm going to maybe even do a taper of some sort on it. I like kind of the uniform taper, it's kind of fun. There we go. So that's pretty cool. And now, a really cool thing you can do, and a lot of people don't do this because mainly it looks ugly for almost anything else, so we're going to add a gradient to this stroke. All right, so you can see at first glance that gradient is doing absolutely nothing. So what we want to do is I want to take this stroke now, and I'm going to make it a very simple one. I'm going to first take it to black on each end. And I can go back and adjust this color a little later, and I'm going to take the middle color and I'm going to just kind of give it a lighter highlight than the rest of the bar. So at first glance, let's zoom out a little bit, we start to get some definition, we start to get some nice interplay between the two. So what we can do now is, we got to keep remembering to select it, we can begin to kind of pull in colors, and you'll see the closer I pull them in, maybe the more area I get out of them. What I like to do too is I actually use my opacity quite often, and I'll start taking the opacity down just for the heck of it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And this is really the experimenting part of this. So you can see when we start taking it down, we can make something a little more stylized. Now, at any point, if you do not like this, that's okay. Let's go and select it there. What we can do is we can go and edit it, or we can take the taper off. I'm going to go ahead and do that for you guys. Let's see what it looks like without the taper. All right. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just mess with it. Now I'm going to take this back down to 0 and show you something else. All right. Now with 0, it's going to look a little different. Remember, 0 is when it went left and right. So we're going to do that with left and right here. So we went from a nice kind of abstract, it doesn't really look dimensional, but let's keep going back here until I can get to that. There we go. It kind of looks, you know, rounded. That's nice. To, by changing this to 0, you got to select it, it will give us something pretty unique. All right, so it starts to give us some cool dimension. What I'm going to do here is bring everything back up to 100, and we can reverse this gradient if we want to. That's also a fun one to do. Make sure we get this back to 100. There we go. And the trick with this is simply dealing with the colors around it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to match somewhat my outside gradient color. And maybe, you know, maybe we'll flip this. Maybe we'll make this darker in the middle. Let's see what this gives us. Click away. Now you guys can see. You guys see that? It's an illusion. It's really just a little lighter on each side. At any point, again, you can go in there and adjust it. So we'll grab that real quick so you guys can see. And we can take it down to like 80% and so forth. There we go. But now we have a really nice dimensional aspect. So that's the first starting point. And what I can do now is I have a couple options. What I like to do, you'll see a lot of tutorials that have used the transform option here, and I don't really do that. I just use my Alt key. I hold down my Option key, and I move it over. I use smart guides, and I just begin to kind of eyeball out where it's at. And, you know, I can go back and measure these later. I can pull up a grid or a ruler guide. That's all fine and dandy, too. You can see that's too many, so once I get where I think I'm getting close, I can basically start going back and kind of evening them out. Now, you guys know, maybe you don't know, you have an align palette. Now, our align palette is kind of hidden. It's up here. And what I can do is actually distribute objects horizontally, and it will give me an accurate distance between them. So that's a really great little tool, the align palette. So now what we've created in a very short period of time is a pretty decent looking kind of nav bar here. We have our background, we have the nav body, and then we have these gradients, which I'll show you on the white. Maybe it'll be a little harder to see. Now you can see why I put a background, which are just light, dark to light. And those are really fun too. So now we have some options. Now we can play with the body a little bit. So let's lock our divs. Let's go to the nav body and let's go to the appearance editor. And now what we can do is a few things. So first thing I want to do is select this, and I'm going to go ahead and apply a stroke to it. Now in this case, just a normal stroke. I probably, being that this is bluish, should make it some sort of blue. Yeah, we're making that blue, and sound like Bob Ross. We're painting happy trees. And I can go ahead and adjust this to any which way I want. That's fine. I like to click away now and then. That just gives it a nice kind of feel to it. I'm going to actually lower the weight of that. I want to lower it I want it just to be a hairline here, and I'm actually going to change the color. And again, I like to do these tutorials just on the fly with you guys to show you really how things are going to turn out. They don't always look amazing like you see in tutorials on YouTube and whatnot, because those people have done it multiple times and they script that. I'm just kind of flying off the seat of my pants here just because you guys are doing the same thing. So now that I have that, I can add some effects to my fill. So what I want to do in the appearance editor is I want to select the word fill, I want to click on the FX, and I want to hit stylize. Now when I hit stylize, I can hit drop shadow, and I hit feather by accident there, but I'm going to go ahead and hit drop shadow. There it is. And I'm going to hit the preview button. Now you can see it's not really working, so what's going on? Well, in Illustrator, remember, everything has to be selected. Now let's see if we can get it to work. There it is. All right. So now we can add a drop shadow. Now I like to turn my drop shadows rather far down, and I'm not a huge fan of using black. If I have a bluish color, I like to put it almost toward the blue tint, and kind of do it that way. Let's try that. Let's go up maybe to 65. A little intense, maybe 55. There we go. All right, we can blur this. We can offset this. Obviously, we want to blur it somewhat. We can put it 0.05. That looks good. And look at this. It's right under fill, so if you go away a little bit, it's no big deal. Our offset we can mess with. We can change the light source wherever we need be. You can see I really pulled it down once I hit preview. So I'm going to just have it slightly offset to the bottom here. So my light is going to shine from the top down, hopefully. In that case, now I'm getting something pretty special. So the next step is I want to add a highlight to this. And highlights are super, super easy. I've seen people do them a lot of different ways. I've seen people literally like draw circles on things. They lighten said object up a little bit. Let's go to blue. They blur them. They use gradient mesh. This is really where you can experiment and have some fun. And we're going to kind of blur this out here real quick. You can see just really quickly, roughly how I can do that. And it helps if you take a stroke off on that. There we go. So we can start kind of getting the illusion of buttons and whatnot. And this is really the down and dirty way to do it. This isn't the way that most tutorials will tell you, but it's a good starting point, and it'll allow you to really kind of get your product done pretty quick. It's like a fake radial, so to speak, if you were doing a radial gradient. And we can take that, and we could duplicate that if I took it and hold my Alt key down and did the intersect button. That's all great. Let's do it another way, though. Let's do a transparency mode. I'm going to just hit delete here. And I'm going to get this, and what I'm going to do is simply basically draw a shape. So what I like to do is lock this, and I like to call this one, and I'm going to put it below my div for now, highlight. And I'll drag it above it so it's all in the right order. And what I can do here is I can use a shape. I can use really anything I want. But let's say I want a really interesting, you guys have seen these all over the internet probably, kind of icon-esque like you see on Google Chrome and Safari and whatnot highlight. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to go ahead and make it super light blue. And now what I'm going to do is hit it to screen. Now, at first appearance, because of our background, this looks extremely lousy. So I have some options. First option is I can use gradients. So what I'll do here is in my dark gradient, I'm going to turn down to 0. And I'm going to reverse these real quick. And now I can kind of blend them. I can flip them and blend it downward. I can highlight here. We'll go a little brighter. There we go. So that gives us kind of a blur at the bottom. But we still are encountering the huge problem, if I click away here, of this not cutting out. So again, we have ways to do this. One, you can just get your A tool, your selection tool, your direct selection tool, and you can just start to kind of narrow this down and kind of move it into place. And sometimes this is the easiest way, to be honest with you, using your handles, going back to kind of old school 101 kind of elements. In this case, we kind of need a little curve there, don't we? And you know what? I'm going to do it on that little guy right there. Go to my A tool and kind of move that up. There we go. Just make sure it's in place. And give yourself a nice highlight. Then go to your transparency. Again, we can set this to screen easily, but what I want to do is make it very, very subtle. And now you can see when I turn the opacity down over the whole thing, I have a pretty decent kind of shape. Now there's other ways to do this, okay? One of the most famous ways you'll see is they'll actually take the shape itself and they'll kind of manipulate it and warp it. So I could duplicate that. I could just simply redraw kind of a similar shape. That works too. Depends what you're into. I can add an anchor point, get my direct selection tool, and we're going to make sure we convert that guy. And we'll kind of convert these to our liking. These out. We can do something like this. Again, it's up to you guys really how you want to do that. And I'm just kind of, again, going with it. I don't really have a definite idea. I'd hope you guys would sketch yours out a little bit. Now I can set this sucker to screen. Maybe take it down to 30%. And if I'm still not happy, I can go and edit it more. So I can get kind of a undulation there. And maybe even add a blur effect to it. We'll do a Gaussian blur. And this is going to be way too high. This is going to kind of take it out a little bit. Just a little bit of blur in there. And now, what you have is, so far, a pretty cool, a pretty dimensional toolbar. Now, I'm looking at this, and again, being that I'm anal retentive with this stuff, which you should be if you're in this field, I want to go ahead and just kind of play with these anchors a little more, and I want to set this up to something where, honestly, I'm pretty happy with, and I think the best way to get me happy on this one is to kind of keep it straight in the middle. All right, so we have our layers, we have our highlight that's set to screen, we have our little gradients that are our dividers, and you can see they react with the screen as well. You can move those above and below. It's up to you. Let's move them above. I think that actually looks better. And we have our nav body. You can see without the nav body, it's just the ghost of it. And we have our background, of course, and really harsh white, so hopefully none of you are in the dark looking at that. All right, next step is our text layer. So this is the same way to make buttons too, guys, by the way. This is very similar. So with our text layer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my text tool, T. I'm going to type home. And we're going to start just with the word home. And we're going to kind of put it on our menu where we want. Now, there is no inner shadow. We want to kind of make this look cut out. So we're going to kind of do a interesting trick. First, I'm going to make the color of this word home. I'm going to take it to a very similar color to my background of here, this bluish. Always make swatches. I didn't this time, so now I have to kind of go in and just adjust these. All right, now that I have this word home, I'm going to duplicate it and pull it down. And I'll show you that move again. I hold my Alt key, I pull it down slightly, and then I click over. Usually, if I don't have my snap on, which I do, I'm going to click over with my mouse, one little tweak, and I'm going to lighten this up just a little bit. So let's see if we can't get maybe the illusion of it. Now, if you don't like that, if you're doing that and you're messing up, hit Command C for copy, and then do paste in front, Command F. And what that will do now is give you an exact duplicate right in front of it. So now I'll lighten up this. We'll go really light. We'll go like a lighter blue. Okay. And I can get my move tool, and what I'll do is just go down a little bit, and immediately it gives me the illusion of light. And maybe I'll pick a side just for it to kind of go to. You don't want to do too much. You don't want to do this because then you break your illusion of depth. What you want to do is, let's go back a few steps, down slightly, and actually like that right there because our light source is coming from up top. And now we have a home button. All right. Now at this point, there's a lot of different things you can do. You can copy these. You can change the text. What I like to do is maybe do home. So what we can do is duplicate this, lock this guy. Again, don't make it more work than you need to. And because I kept them text, I can simply go in, change them up a little bit. Let's see here. I got the word gallery here, and then the word home is probably hidden because of where I put it. I can't type it yet. Gallery. I'm using a very similar color to my background. So what I can do here, and even if that doesn't work, I can fix this. Spelling. There we go. Gallery. I can do the same kind of technique, so I can duplicate this. I can highlight it. And I can take that highlight and I can actually make it darker. So I would save the swatch obviously, but I'm going to make this a little darker. And now I have the ability to kind of move one on top of the other. The trick with these layers, guys, they get confusing sometimes, is where you have the little dot here is what you're selecting. So don't get too overwhelmed. There it is, gallery. And basically you just go and finish up your banner there. So I could get home, gallery. I can change this up if I really wanted to, if I want to do all caps. You can see I'd have to do both. I like locking my layers for this stuff. There we go. Make sure I select that. There it is. And now, if I just select my top layer here, I can move all of them together into place. I use smart guides because I like them. And if I get real close, you'll see there's a subtle inner shadow. And that is how you create a web toolbar. Now, I want to challenge you guys to go and make your very own unique web toolbar and your own button, standalone button, maybe using highlights and whatnot. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll catch you guys next time.